70 years ago, a mighty white oak dropped an acorn right here. You can see where this story's headed. I've decided to build a timber frame cabin because why not? And it starts with this log here. This is by far the longest piece of wood I've ever put on the sawmill. This is an oak tree. It's 16.5 feet long. It's gonna max out the sawmill, and I would like to get 3 timbers out of it. I'm gonna be cutting this stuff on a HM 126 by Woodland Mills. This thing has 16.5 feet of cutting potential, and we're gonna use all of it on this log. In order to make this cabin, it's gonna be a lean-to style, so one side's gonna have 16-foot long timbers, and the other side will have like 13 feet. So that's what we're doing here, is we're making our 16-foot timbers. There's just one problem. This log really isn't big enough to cut 3 timbers out of. Let me explain. Oak is notorious for bowing, twisting, cracking, and creeping. And what this means is the way that I cut these timbers is gonna dictate how much movement I have to deal with. When milling timbers, there's the option of boxing the heart or removing all the heartwood completely. Because I'm gonna try to get 3 timbers, I'm gonna have to do both on this log, which is gonna be a challenge. Boxing the heart means this. This is the pith of the log, the juvenile wood from when the tree was just a little baby. In order to get a boxed heart timber, it means that the pith will be perfectly centered from one end of the log to the other. The juvenile wood around the pith here that we're trying to box is a much softer wood, and it actually dries, especially in oak, at a much different rate than the rest of the wood. If this wood is not centered in the timber, it can cause it to bend and warp and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I'll show you in a second what I mean. In order to get my plan and lay out how I want these timbers cut out of this log, I'm just using a marking stone, usually what you use to mark metal with, and a level. You can use chalk, you can use a pencil, whatever you got. And I'm also using a 6x6 inch piece of cardboard, which is the size of at least 2 of the timbers that I'm gonna cut. This is a trick I learned from the guy I worked for at his sawmill. So what I do is I always start at the small end of the log first and try to figure out how I can fit the cuts into the limited space. I'm also paying attention to any bow in the log in order to make sure I have enough wood in the middle of the log as well to get my square timber. Unfortunately, as you can see, I don't have enough space, so I'm squeezing the pith off to a corner of one of the logs. As we already know, that's not ideal. We wanted to box the heart, but we don't have too many options with the limited space, so we're just gonna go for it, and we'll see what happens. Now that I've got the small end of the log all laid out, I'll go to the other end and do the same exact thing. I'm using the level to make sure that the square marks on the top are both level with each other. Once I've got it all laid out, I can take my tape measure and measure from the bunk up to my first cut and get it leveled out on both ends of the log. This will allow me to make my cut and hit both ends right where I made my mark. I don't have toe boards to be able to lift one end of the log up or down, so what I'm using is this uniloader to get it lifted up and put in my shims, aka scrap wood, to get the log level. Usually I move logs around with our little tractor, but our friend wanted to borrow it for the weekend, so he dropped off his uniloader here, and man, what a great tool this is. Honestly, couldn't have been able to pick up that oak log without it, or even move the timbers around. I really put this thing to use this weekend. I have it for the whole weekend. Man, this thing was awesome. Now that I got my plan, I'm gonna start whittling down the log and cut it in 1-inch increments. This will give me some nice oak boards that I can use for something in the future while I work the log down into the posts that I'm trying to get. We want to use every part of this tree that we can. I really don't like wasting wood. This thing took 70 years to grow. I want to utilize every single part of it. Now that I've got the log whittled down, it's time to cut it in half to get the dimensions I want for the timbers. Again, I'm cutting 2 6x6 inch posts and 1 6x8 inch post. I'm going to set the top hunk, which will become our 6x6s, off to the side and work on the 6x8 first. Again, thank goodness I've got the uni. If I had to wrestle this thing around by hand, I'd likely throw out my back. If you're wondering why I'm cutting a 6x8 post and not just 3 6x6s, it's because I plan on doing a timber frame section in the center of the cabin, which will support our loft. That's what that whole next video is going to be about, so hit that red subscribe button if you want to be there for that. I would appreciate it if you did. here we go. We've got our first finished post, our 6 by 8 inch by 16.5 foot post. So now it's time to grab our other chunk of wood and cut our two 6 by 6 inch timbers. This is the moment that I've been alluding to where the log has a mind of its own. I did not perfectly center the heart. We're gonna see what happens. This is crazy. As I make my cut next to the pith, you can start to see the tension in the wood just a little bit. There's literally several hundred pounds in this log and it's lifting up easily as I make my cut. And watch right at the end when the tension is finally released. How crazy is that? As you can see, I've already cut some more stuff for the cabin build. It's gonna go right here where the wall tent is. I'll sell that, and this is the platform. I'll beef it up a little bit. And as you can see, here's the timbers that we cut today. Handling these giant timbers is gonna be a huge challenge from here on out. I've already had to return my buddy's uniloader, so now it's just manpower. Luckily, I've got my buddies coming down from Minnesota this weekend, and with their help, we're gonna wrestle these things around, cut our joinery in it, and raise the timbers. And if you want to see this cabin build and see how these timbers hold up over time if they twist and it's a huge failure, hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next video.